breaking point really happened when they had the army helicopters flying over our house, and they were so low, my wife could see the whites of the eyes, the guys hanging out of the helicopter with the machine gun. And my wife sent the kids into the house, and I came back that evening and she said, you know what? This is no way to live.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servosity. Today I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Let's get real for a moment. You ever feel overwhelmed? Do you sometimes feel like I'm not enough? There's just so much to do, and the next day there's even more. Well, my conversation with Roland is exactly what you need. He had to overcome the Zimbabwe uprising. His wife was quite literally hit by a bus, and he had to reinvent himself and his family in America. So if you want practical examples of how you can do this, don't miss out on my conversation with Roland today. Roland, you had a really interesting business in a country that most of us can't relate to. So kind of take me back to the beginning of this tech business you started in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so Zimbabwe, for a lot of people who don't know, is just north of South Africa. It used to be known as Rhodesia or Southern Rhodesia. And my family initially migrated there in the 1890s when it was first being colonized. And Southern Rhodesia became Rhodesia in 1965, and they declared independence from Britain at that point because it was a British colony. And then from 65 to 1980, we went through more of an internal struggle. There was a what we call a bush war, where basically it was more as Africa was changing and it was being handed over to the majority population, Rhodesia kind of stuck out and thought that could last for a bit longer. But eventually in 1980, the winds of change finally got to Zimbabwe, and Robert Mugabe got into power in 18th of April of 1980. So Zimbabwe went through a couple of different changes in my lifetime. And my wife and I actually met in 1990. So I was working at a company, and I'd achieved quite a lot of success in the corporate world. By the age of 22, I was financial manager of a public traded company. There was a group of 7 different companies that I was in charge of. We got married in 91. So it was kind of 21 months after we met. And we decided to have kids straight away. But what we didn't realize is that it would be 8 long days before she would finally fall pregnant. So 9 months and 8 days after we got married, our little baby girl, Kirsten, was born. And in between my daughter and my son, he came along 21 months later, we decided, you know what? The economy's opening up. Let's start a business. So I'd been doing books for people on the side, and we really saw the tech industry opening up and a glass manufacturing opening up. So at the age of 25, we kind of left the corporate world, started our own business, and we really, the economy in the Rhodesian days, there had been sanctions on the country, so it was very closed. You couldn't import anything. Things were, it was very difficult to get anything into the country. And from 1980 to 1990, Zimbabwe had operated in more of a closed economy. And after that, things really opened up. So we saw the opportunity that this was the time to really kickstart a business. And we took advantage of the fact that people were wanting to now get involved in this growing economy, and we were signing up sole distribution rights for the entire country as this young startup.
Wow. And so what was the startup? What was the seed, the idea of like, we're going to do what?
So things were also a little bit different back then, but we were building our own computers.
Yeah.
We were manufacturing our own toner cartridges, making our own ribbons, and making our own ink cartridges. And we sold a lot of magnetic media, the backup tapes, diskettes. So we got to the point where, because we were the sole distributors for 3M, which became Amation, we were selling 80,000 diskettes per month. So we pretty much controlled everything from, we had retail stores, we had distribution, and we were selling to government, to corporate, through our retail stores, to other computer retailers. We were selling to other computer stores. So we kind of controlled a lot of the distribution coming through the country. So from 93 to 99, we've basically become one of the biggest computer companies in the country. And it's funny how life happens. I remember Mandy and myself, as we were celebrating our 8th wedding anniversary. And I remember making the prideful boast at that point that, wow, we're making so much money that by the time, before we hit 40, we could retire and never have to work again in our lives. And I think sometimes you have a problem of pride comes before a fall. And you kind of think, wow, I've done all of this myself, but you don't realize if you put everything into things that can disappear overnight, sometimes they do. And 2 days after our wedding anniversary, I got a phone call. Still remember, it was a Thursday afternoon by 2:30 p.m. Somebody said, it was on my wife's phone, but the person said, your wife had an accident. And I rushed out there, and basically what had happened, my wife had been turned into a service station, and the 70-seater bus T-boned her.
Oh, my goodness.
Her neck was snapped at C6, C7, and it was hit so hard that basically her spine was pushed across and ended up where C6 was trapped under C7, and they had to push it back into place and then wire it back together. And I must admit, at first I was angry at God, thinking, how could he let this happen?
Sure.
Because we had built up this perfect world. Here I had the nice house, the nice car, successful business, beautiful wife, 2 great kids. I painted this perfect little world for myself, and suddenly things got turned upside down, because in the beginning, Mandy had no movement. So basically, from her neck down, she had 0 movement. She was completely paralyzed. And it took about a year to get some other movement back in her arms. But it's strange how things happen, because when I was speaking to my daughter, because the bus driver had run away and everybody in the bus had disappeared into the bushes, and our lawyer said, well, you got to find out what happened. Ask your daughter, does she remember anything? My daughter was 7 at the time.
So she was in the car.
She was in the car. Now, when I trace back the steps, this is when you start to realize that sometimes that there was a guardian angel looking after us, because my son, who was 5, said to my wife, I'm not going to go. I'm going to sit here and watch TV and the maid in the car. And normally my wife would have just picked him up and said, no, you're coming with us. It's a beautiful day. But for some reason, he was so adamant. he wasn't going to move, and he just sat there. And my wife eventually said, okay, fine, I'm going to go. As they're getting to the car, my daughter says, Mom, if Craig's not coming with us, I want to travel in the front. Now, she'd never put her in the front. Theoretically, they always say that kids have got to be in the back.
Right.
So she allowed her to be in the front seat. And where that bus hit was directly behind the driver's door. If anybody had been in the back, they would have been killed instantly. There wouldn't have been a hope. And that was when I suddenly realized, wow, a guardian angel was looking after me. And when I asked my daughter, do you remember anything that happened? He says, no, Daddy. All I remember was a white light and nothing else. And she came out of that accident without a scratch. My son was perfectly safe at home. And then I realized, wow, okay, so this did happen, but my kids were safe. And if something had happened to them, I don't know how I would have managed to get through the next few years.
Yeah, no doubt. So I can relate. I wish I couldn't, but I could relate to that anger and saying, why did this happen, and focusing on the negative instead of, like you said, the miracle, the blessing of your son not being in the car at all, and your daughter riding in the front that never happens. Right. And the timing of that all being there. Just want to understand, like, you built this successful business, like you said, the wife and 2 kids, and, you made this boastful statement about, we may not have to work by the time we're 40, but give me some context about how many employees did your business have at that peak?
Yeah. So we employed 150 people. We had 5 locations around the country.
That's hard for most of us to imagine, 150 employees in 5 locations.
We handled manufacturing, distribution, computer assembly. So it achieved great success from the point of view that, we were making lots of money. We had a successful operation, but we didn't realize how things were going to turn around when the government started their land invasion program. And that happened, my wife, she left that day and she didn't come back for 1 year. So initially it was ICU, the operation, being in hospital, then from hospital in a rehabilitation center. So I was juggling, trying to run my business, but I'm trying to be with my wife, I'm trying to be with my kids. And prior to that, Andy took care of the shopping and looking after the kids and everything. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to juggle all of that.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
In the midst of that, the government started this chaotic land acquisition program. And they decided to take over the white-owned farms. And then that violence spiraled out and spread into the cities. And all of a sudden, people were getting tortured, murdered, and there was just a lot of chaos at the time. And what then happened is that Zimbabwe is an agricultural-based economy, but when you take over the farms and you're no longer exporting food, and in fact, you're at the point where you have to import food because people who are on the farms are starving, which is kind of a crazy situation. So then what happened is that the government's plan was to basically just print more money. So when things got short, you just carried on printing money. And if you ever want to look it up, you can buy 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar note.
$100 trillion note. Like like we would think about a $20 bill or whatever. There's $100 trillion.
And the more the economy spiraled out of control, and the more the government printed money, things just became crazy. So we had got to the point where we could double our prices in the morning, double them at lunchtime, and then double them at 4:00, and then start the next day and double them again. And
I don't think I've ever interviewed somebody that was an MSP that doubled their prices maybe in a year, let alone
3 times a day.
3 times a day.
and it's amazing how you start to adjust to where there would be people rioting in the street, and you just say, okay, as they came up, close the doors, get everybody tied in the back, wait for that to go through. Maybe there was a few broken windows. And then it's like, okay, open the doors again, and you carry on as if this is normal. And then people would get text messages, don't go down the street, they're burning cars. And after a while, you just started to adjust to that and start to think that it's normal.
Wow.
And it was during that time.
Let me ask you this question, Roland. As somebody that has no idea what it's like to live in Zimbabwe, let alone the continent of Africa, before your wife's accident, what was any of this happening?
I mean, the economy was growing, things were peaceful, everybody was getting on. So it's a very beautiful country to live in. The great thing is that you've got your cities, but just outside of the cities, you've got your natural wildlife. You can go and be amongst a zebra and giraffe and elephant, and they're right there. But then you've also got your hub of your cities. So, Zimbabwe only had 12 million people. The capital had about 1 million people. So it's not that small. But, it had a thriving economy at that point. And then it was.
But that you didn't live in a place where that wasn't at all regular before. And now all of a sudden you're almost adjusting to this riots in the street and torching of vehicles and violence.
And it's all about, people in government holding on to their positions through whatever means necessary and squashing any form of opposition. And we really thought that when an opposition party came up, because Mugabe had basically squashed the opposition when he got into power in 1980. And in 1990, as things were opening up, by 99, a new party had come into place called the Movement for Democratic Change. And we really thought, well, this craziness of the land acquisition can't continue, and the violence in the street. We've got to have change. So we really got behind supporting the opposition with vehicles and computers and providing them with printers and cash and that type of thing. And we really thought that, wow, we could make a difference. But when it came to the elections of 2002, Mugabe just ensured that no matter who you voted for, he was going to win that election. So, when you control the people that are monitoring the election and people counting the votes, and you control the police force and the army and the press, you've got a lot of power at your hands. And the opposition kept on asking us to do more and more things. After Mugabe stole the 2002 elections, they would do things like say, well, we've got to try and get footage of the violence that's taking place. BBC was banned, CNN was banned. So they approached us and we said, okay, we're going to send out these tapes of the footage of the violence that's in the city, and we're going to send them off as faulty backup tapes. So we were shipping them off to the UK, and then they were getting to the BBC. And then one evening, the Minister of Information got on TV and said, well, somehow things are getting out. We're going to find out how they're getting out, and we're going to open up every single DHL package until we find out who's sending them. And at that point, because of the delays in shipping, we had no idea. Had all of our stuff gone out, how much of it was still in the country, and that's got our name on it with all of this footage of what the government was doing. So
yeah,
we spent about sleepless 2 weeks wondering what was going to happen. You know, at our house, we had 8-foot walls, electric gates, and cameras. But if they're sending in the army to get you, you know, you don't stand a chance. So we had our domestic servants who worked for us. They'd been with us for years, and we said to them, okay, if somebody comes for us, this is your escape plan. Take the kids, go over the back wall, get hold of my sister, and then we'll deal with them. But as long as the kids can get out.
Yeah.
And
that's crazy to even have to think about that kind of contingency plan. It's just hard to relate to.
And then my wife got kind of mad at me because I did an interview with the president of the opposition. And they put the lights behind me so you couldn't see my face, but we'd gone to his house. And at that point, he was the most watched man in the country. And we'd gone in my car, and my wife was just, no, this is going too far. You know, I'm in a wheelchair. If they come and get you, how are we going to survive? And then the breaking point really happened when they had the army helicopters flying over our house. And they were so low, my wife could see the whites of the eyes, the guys hanging out of the helicopter with the machine gun. And my wife sent the kids into the house. And I came back that evening and she said, you know what? This is no way to live.
Wow.
We keep thinking of these things as normal, but sooner or later, if they come and pick you up, what's going to happen? So let's get out while we can. So that was January 2003, opened up a world map, said, you know, we've got Australia, UK, Europe, US, and then we found this place called Katy, Texas, just west of Houston. And we were like, sounds pretty good. So we formed a company, signed a 5-year lease on our premises, organized a visa, and by the 25th of March 2003, 2.5 months later, we were physically here going, okay, we're here, now what do we do?
Well, just for some context for folks like the visas and things, help me understand why it was necessary to set up a company and take a 5-year lease and do those sort of things. Because you hadn't been there. It's not like you flew out there and took a look at the prime locations and, you couldn't even visit the city you were going to live, right?
So it was very difficult to travel anywhere from Zimbabwe because you had to have a visa even to go to the surrounding countries. But to get into a place like America, virtually impossible, even to visit. To give you an example, when we were going through our visa, you had to go to the American embassy. Every single person was turned down. So we took that leap of faith by putting a deposit on a house, signing a 5-year lease on our premises, setting up a bank account. If we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have got in. Now, what they've got is a program called the L1A visa, which is a company relocation. And that's effectively what we were doing, is relocating ourselves and some of our guys across to the US. But it's funny, when we got to the US Embassy, so when you look at the timing of it, so to make an appointment with the US Embassy, you had to go to the bank, pay them Zimbabwe dollars, they would convert it to US dollars. The bank would make the appointment. So the bank makes the appointment for the 19th of March. But our flights were meant to be Friday, the 21st of March.
Wow.
So we're like, okay, this is a little bit tight, but we should be okay. But then our INS documents got delayed, and they were coming in on Wednesday, the 19th of March. So we're like, okay, we got the appointment with the embassy, but hopefully our documents are going to be there in time. But then, of course, on that day, the opposition had organized a nationwide stay away. So in protest of the government, if you protested in the street, you got shot. So they said, okay, we're going to have a nationwide stay away. Every business, every person just stayed at home. But now, of course, we meant to be getting our documents.
Yeah.
So I phoned DHL and I said, the stay away is tomorrow. Can I pick up my documents? And they said, if you come to the airport, we're going to have skeleton staff pick up your documents. So we drove to the airport, picked up our documents, rushed to the US Embassy, get to the embassy, and basically everybody in front of us gets turned down. But I'm going, well, I've got my INS documents. He took those documents and he dropped them on the floor and said, those aren't worth the paper that they printed on.
Wow.
And my heart dropped. But I said, if you look in there, you'll actually see we've signed a 5-year lease. We've set up the bank account. Because he said, you're not going there to start up a business. You're just saying that to get into the US.
Right.
But because we had taken that leap of faith, he then said, okay, went through it, stamped our passport, stamped the kid's passport. But then he said, wait a minute, your wife's got a British passport because her mother was Scottish, so she had managed to get a British passport. Says, you need to give us an extra $500,000. So I'm like, but the banks are closed. Where am I going to get that money? Now, at that particular time, in US dollar terms, that was probably only a couple of $1,000s. But in Zimbabwe terms, that was more than some people were earning in a year. And he says, and I said, how am I going to get the money? The banks are closed. Will you take a check? No. Will you take a credit card? No, it has to be cash. So, and he says, and because of the nationwide stay away, we're closing early. You've got 2 hours to get it. Otherwise, you're not going to get a visa.
Wow.
So I phoned somebody that used to buy computers from us for cash. And I knew he always dealt in cash. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm leaving the country, but I need you to lend me $500,000. We'll get it back to you when the bank's open tomorrow. And he was good enough to lend me the money, and we walked into the embassy with our bags of cash and handed it over, and we got our stamped a passport. Now, that was Wednesday afternoon. Now, we still had to get British visas to fly through Britain. And they wouldn't give us visas for myself and our kids until we had an American visa, because they were like, we're not going to give you a visa until we can show that you're not going to stay in the UK. Otherwise, you're not really going to the States. You're just saying that to get into Britain.
Yeah.
So 2:00 in the morning on Thursday morning, I arrive at the British Embassy. And I can't believe it. The line goes around the block. And you gotta be kidding me. And eventually, 4:30 p.m. Thursday evening, we got our British visas to fly through Heathrow.
Wow.
And we got on the plane 9:00 the next morning.
So was there any sleep in those parts? That's amazing.
The crazy thing is, that afternoon, Mugabe was so mad about the nationwide stay away that he then started sending people around from house to house to go, we're looking for people that are supporting the opposition. And I don't know what would have happened, but at that point we were on the plane safely to the, and quite honestly, we didn't even feel, I didn't even relax until we were over halfway. It was like, they're going to turn the plane back. What's going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah. So crazy, that story of escape. And then what happens when you land in America and you get to Katy, Texas, to a house you've never seen and a business you've never realized you leased for 5 years you've never seen, but you have a wife and 2 kids, a wife that is paralyzed. And then help me connect just so I don't miss, like, in the meantime, what happened? Because you had this money and you had these friends that could come up with thousands of dollars or $500,000 in Zimbabwe dollars. But what happened to the plan and the resources?
So we had managed to get some money out, and it was difficult because you couldn't just go to the bank and transfer money. You had to transfer it via sources, paying them in cash and moving it out. So we try to keep the operations going in Zimbabwe, and we were trying to move money out as we can to get things going in the US. But, starting a business from scratch, not knowing anybody, not knowing even really what to do. So we were like, well, we're just going to take our experience of what we did in Zimbabwe and do it here. Well, things are different. Selling computers and toners and cartridges and they're available anywhere. You can't be sole distributor when everything's readily available from anywhere. So, marketing your company, getting things going was difficult. And by 2005, we'd got to the point where we'd simply run out of money. And at that point, the Zimbabwe dollar had crashed so heavily any money that we thought we had was pretty much worthless. So things got pretty dire, and with our visas, we couldn't even work. It's not like I could say, well, this is not working, I'm going to go and work for another company. It was an L1A visa that basically said, well, you can only work for this company. So we had to make things work. And we got to a pretty low point when our wife got sick. We had no insurance, no money. And you're just thinking, how do I get out of this situation? But we got involved in Second Baptist Church, and I think, having the church community come around you and give you encouragement. And we had a tiny bit of equity in a house that we'd bought, and we sold that, moved into an apartment, started getting things going. And then in 2006, when we were really building things up, we'd been in the process of applying for green cards because we knew we had to get out of this visa situation.
Yeah.
I got excited, got a letter from the INS. Wow, could this be our green card? And I'm reading the letter, and it's like, this is a letter of deportation.
Oh, no.
So I got hold of my lawyer, and I said, what's going on? And they said, well, basically what's happened is that your visa was tied to Zimbabwe. And with the collapse of Zimbabwe, basically your visa is getting rescinded and you're not going to be able to stay. So I said, well, what are our choices? And they said, well, there's only one choice. You've got to apply for asylum. So we applied for asylum, and we went through the asylum office, got turned down, and then we had to go through the asylum courts. And as we were getting closer to the time, our lawyer said, well, look, with asylum, they're really looking, they want three things. If you've been tortured, that's great. If you have an expert or an independent expert on Zimbabwe that can testify, that's going to be useful. And the important thing is the CIA report on the country. And it's got to show that the situation in your country is dire now, not from when you left, but what is the situation as of today? Well, it came to the 7th of March 2007, and we head into our court date. And of course, instead of three things, I've got zero. I wasn't tortured. We couldn't find an independent expert on Zimbabwe to testify on our behalf. And the US government report on Zimbabwe was late that year. So we head into court. My wife wasn't allowed to be in.
So just for context, you're saying that the CIA prepares a report every year, and for whatever reason, it was late that year.
It's late. So normally we expect it by March. We get to April, it's not out. So we head into court, and I've got all my documents, but it's really our testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And some reports from BBC and CNN, but the critical thing is missing. And for the next 4 hours, I'm being heavily cross-examined by the prosecutor. And
4 hours is a lot of cross-examination.
And he kept coming around. He kept trying to find holes in my story. And the great thing about just being honest and telling the truth is that you can't be tripped up. But he kept coming back to, you weren't tortured. Nothing's going to happen to you. So we don't even know why you're trying to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my wife at that point wasn't allowed in the court. She couldn't hear what I was saying. And eventually, as we're coming out, she just said the blood had drained from my face. I was looking down, and she kind of looked across at me, and I was just kind of shook my head. And I knew at that point he was gunning for us to be deported. And one of the guys from our Bible study, Mike, had come along, and he said, I just said to him, I'm scared. We're going to get deported. Where are we going to go? Because at that point, our Zimbabwean citizenship had also been removed. Our Zimbabwe had removed our Zimbabwean citizenship. So we're citizens of nowhere.
Wow.
And I just said, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How am I going to start again? And he just put his hand on my shoulder and he said, you've got to put your faith and trust in God. Because maybe God's plan is for you to go somewhere and you've got to trust that that's the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but if his plan is for you to stay, then you'd be amazed at what's going to happen. And at that point, I just put my hands in the air and I just said, okay, Lord, I'm in your hands. There is nothing more I can do. I'm at rock bottom. I'm in your hands. I'm going to trust whatever happens. And the most amazing thing happened. We're going back into court. This time I'm allowed in. My wife wheels herself in. And this prosecutor comes in and he just looks different to what he was when he was doing my cross-examination. And in his hand, he's holding these documents. He gives one to the judge, one to our lawyer. And I'm looking down, and it's the CIA report on Zimbabwe that was released the very hour of my cross-examination, the very hour. But now at this point, we're going, we don't know, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We haven't even had a chance to read it. Our lawyer didn't even know it had come out. The prosecutor had not only seen it, but he downloaded it and printed it. He literally spoke to my wife for a few minutes and then said, can I approach the bench? Went up to the judge and said they were talking between themselves. And then the judge said, okay, everybody clear the court.
Wow.
So we walk out, and I said to my lawyer, what is going on? And she said, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never had this happen. They're obviously deliberating something, but we've got no idea. And at that point, the door was open. They call us back in, and as we're coming in, the judge stands up, puts her hands in the air, and just says, welcome to America. The prosecutors dropped the case.
Wow.
And it's just within 20 minutes, we're gone from, we're going to get deported to welcome to America.
Yeah.
And that report contained how the government was now targeting people who had been supporting the opposition. And the prosecutor had, somehow seen it, printed it, read it, and he just stopped the case. And, we got allowed to stay and got our green cards. And eventually in 2013, we became US citizens. So now we're African American.
Yeah. Just not how I think of that normally. That's hilarious, Roland. So many times it was so easy to give up, right? What kept you going when I don't know where to start, right? It seemed like you would never get a visa. Then you thought you had it, and then you had to come up with cash in an unreasonable amount of time. And then you get to America and you don't have what you thought you had, and you're trying to build a business, nobody. And you got a loving wife, but who's paralyzed, and you got 2 kids, and you're trying to start a business from scratch in a new country, in a new home. And then, once things start going well, like you're facing deportation. Like what kept you going through all those things?
So the one thing I will say, I think when things are going good, sometimes you say, for example, back in Zimbabwe, when everything was going great, you tend to think of yourself as independent and I can do everything myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in your hardest, darkest moments that I think that you become closer to God and you draw on His strength. And that's when you realize there's a bigger plan. We don't always know what's going to happen, but we have to put our faith and trust that He's going to somehow get us through this. And at that point, you cannot see it. But when you look back on it, you go, oh, there was a plan. We were being looked after. It got to the point when I was in the cross-examination and I was thinking, wow, if only I had been tortured, it would have made things easier, which is
right. Who says that? I remember you were telling me like you need 3 things and you're like, tortured. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those. And I was like, I've never heard somebody say that.
Can I go back and get tortured? But I think, God got us out safely, got us here. And it doesn't mean because you put your faith and trust in God that you don't have to work. You still have to put in the hard work and the effort. But the one thing that always echoes in our hardest times is to not be afraid of anything. Do not be anxious about anything. And it's a hard thing to do because at hard times you can be anxious. But to just go, okay, I don't know what the next step is, but I'm not going to be anxious. I'm going to be positive. And I know that ultimately whatever God's plan is going to come about.
Tell me about starting this business, and is your and where it is now, and is your wife involved?
Yeah. So my wife's involved every single day. We started what like a traditional computer store, selling, supplying, fixing computers and printers, and to evolve into an MSP. She's been involved in that entire process, and she's an amazing woman. Um, the strength and resilience that she has to overcome the difficulties, and things are difficult, she's got some movement in her arms, but to type, because her hands don't work, she's got to put a splint on her finger. So she went from typing 120 words a minute to now she's got to tap it out with one finger. And then to move her mouse, if she wants to left click, her left hand has got to come across and press down to left click. Right click's even more difficult because you've got to come across and. But you know what? She answers the phone. She um, um, puts in a ticket, transfers it to the text. We've got a camera so she can see where all the texts are and what everybody's doing. And she's working on the marketing plans, um, looking at tickets and working with the techs, and customers got an issue, how can we solve it? And she's not the most technical person, but she's always making a plan. And I think instead of her sitting at home and going, woe is me, she's like, let's do it. We had, for us to get up in the morning, it takes an hour for me to basically get her up, get her dressed, showered. There's certain things that we have to do that just take time. And then she loves to be outside. So she was always an avid gardener. She loves her flowers and her plants. So by default, after her accident, I became an avid gardener because I had to be her hands and her feet.
Yeah.
But she just loves being outside first thing in the morning, watering the plants, planting stuff. Even this morning, she's like, oh, let's move this around here. And then we come into the office and she does a full day work from 8:30 to 6. I have to move her from time to time, but otherwise she's working and making a plan and looking at marketing strategies. She comes to all the conferences with me. We managed to get a lighter wheelchair that only weighs 45 pounds. And I basically carry her into the plane, come back, hold the chair up so it compacts to like a carry-on, and they put that in the hold, and then when it comes out, reassemble the chair and carry her out. And we don't go to all the IT conferences, go on vacations, and just make the most of life. Even though we have limitations, we're not going to stop living. What are the things? How can we? Things are different, but how can we get joy? How can we get peace? How can we enjoy the life that we do have, even though it was maybe different to what we envisaged when we got married?
Yeah. I want to go back to one thing that a lot of us in the U.S. don't get. You started over, but even once you overcame the starting of a business and kind of being flat broke, probably in dire straits, but you had help right before. Tell me about the difference. Like, what kind of help did you have there? Because that's not something we're used to in the U.S.
Yeah. So the one advantage with Africa was we had full-time maid, full-time gardener, and we had initially 3 nurses that used to rotate, and we cut it down to 2 nurses as I started to get more comfortable with doing things on the weekend by myself. But we, and because we had like 4 or 5 different drivers that if Manny wanted to go somewhere, she would just get one of our drivers and they would take her somewhere. So we had a lot of help, and we tried to bring one of our nurse aides across with us. But there was just no way they were going to let her into the US. she tried 3 times to get a visa and got denied. So we got here, and then of course, when you got no money, you certainly can't afford help. And we had to go, wow, our kids were 8 and 10. So our daughter at 10 was like, wow, you're going to be doing all the cooking and help with shopping. I said, it was it. You're going to be cutting the lawn and helping us in our business. When we were getting all the shelving units and putting things together, he was there. We went from 150 people to, oh, wow, there's us.
Wow.
And then at home, the kids had to learn. When the kids were coming home from school at that point, I'd drop Mandy off, pick up the kids, and they had to learn how to do a 2-man lift to pick Mandy in and out of a wheelchair, and put her on a chair and then put her back in a wheelchair. We had to learn to adapt as a family and all work together to make it work.
Mm. So you were starting to say something earlier about it's not what you thought when you got married, right? No, it's nobody. I don't think anybody envisions being paralyzed. Certainly not fearing for their lives, fleeing the country they know, their friends, their livelihood, their business. What do you do to focus and not look back and say, we used to have this, or we used to be able to do this?
Well, I think the one thing that Mandy and I don't know if it was just in our personalities or our character, but we had both left home when we were teenagers. Both came from broken homes, and we were like, okay, we can't look back. We can only look forward. And for some reason, that's always been, there's no point in dwelling on the past. This is what we've got now. Let's make the most of what we've got.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to enjoy life. You've got to go, how can I get joy out of what I'm doing? How can I get joy out of this situation? And, the one great thing about like the Texas beaches is you can drive onto them, and we literally drive up, I take Mandy out. There's parts where the cars go up and down that she can go up and down on a wheelchair. And then I can get her in a chair with her feet in the sand with the waves walk. So she's not like swimming as such, but you actually feel like you're right on the beach.
Yeah.
So you've got to take those times away where you're in nature, going up to either like a foresty, she loves streams and that type of thing, or going down to the beach, and just being outside and getting enjoyment and going, okay, it's not the same as walking on the beach, but we're going to make it as close as possible and get as much enjoyment out of life as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lesson I could continue to learn from right there. Tell me about the business now, right? You started as a computer shop. What is it you're doing now? About how many people do you have?
So it's a bit of a change. So we went from 0 to now we've got 20 people. Mm-hmm. We were doing what would be the equivalent of like 50 million in Zimbabwe. This year we're going to do 4 million. So it's different. But we moved from just doing computer repairs to IT support to starting to get into MSP. And then we went full MSP, closed down the storefront, but we made it more into technical account management and our dispatcher and the guys handling the inventory are now on what was the front store. And then we've got the workshops where we put the computers together, and then we separated where all the help desk guys have got their own place, and then we've got a team in Manila as well. So that helps with our us being able to provide 24-hour service.
So tell me about the time that you decided to change all your systems, to go all in MSP and the best laid plans.
Yeah. So
what happened?
We had been on ACPAC, which became Sage ACPAC, which became Sage 300, right from the beginning, 93. So we went from the ACPAC DOS system to eventually what was become Sage 300. But as we became MSP, we knew ultimately our contracts and our invoicing had to be done out of our PSA system. And our inventory would have to move. So we were trying to make this plan, and eventually we decided to say, came up with this profit fuel idea. So we decided to make the move. Okay, we're going to go from ConnectWise to Autotask and Data RMM. Since we're doing that, we're going to change our backups from Acronis to Data backups. And we're going to take our two websites, which were one for retail and one for MSP, and merge them into one. We're going to take our inventory and move it into our ESA. And we're going to take our accounting system and move it to QuickBooks. So it was like, everything's going to happen. So we thought, well, between Christmas and New Year, it's going to be a tight push, but let's do this big move. So it was coming to the end of 2023. We were like, if we're going to do MSP properly, this is how we've got to get all of our contracts and inventory out of Sage. So we made this decision, and at Christmas, my wife became ill, and I didn't realize how ill she was. We had people visiting, but it got to the day after Christmas, and she was really struggling to breathe. She hadn't been trying to say anything, but we took her oxygen levels. They were down to 72.
Wow.
Her heart rate was 105, and we were like, okay, I'm taking you into the ER. She didn't want to go, but I'm like, we don't really have a choice. So we went to the ER. Straight away, they realized, okay, double pneumonia. But it was also coupled with, at that point, she had a urinary infection, a blood infection that we didn't know about, a chest infection, and then double pneumonia. So they moved her straight into ICU. From ICU, then they realized she was getting worse, so they had to intubate her. And we ended up spending 3 weeks in the ICU. And it was kind of crazy because I was with her doing this stuff, but I was also trying to roll over the company. So I'm in the ICU with a laptop, trying to do this major migration, coordinate with the guys. People here in the office trying to figure out how every piece of software changed and how to still continue to do support and invoice, and the migration wasn't going that well. I don't think I slept for the next 3 weeks, but we got to that point where the doctors eventually came to me and said, we don't know what else to do. Your wife is not responding. She's been intubated, but her oxygen levels continue to drop, even she had so many tubes running into her with all the antibiotics, trying to treat all the infections. We've got her on the ventilator, but we're going to have to move her to the Texas Medical Center downtown Houston, and maybe they can find something. But what we're saying to you is we don't think that she's going to get better, so just get your affairs into order. And
wow.
I just remember it was Saturday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were moving to Texas Medical Center, and I remember walking out. It was a cold morning, still dark, and just thinking, wow, what am I going to do now? And when I turned on the radio, song came on the radio, Katie Nicole, just hold on. And I was like, that's what I need. And then Casting Crowns came up next, just be held. And it's like, you're feeling overwhelmed, things, just be held. And we got to the Texas Medical Center, and that Sunday morning, my wife had been in like a coma that kept her very sedated. But Sunday morning, she lifted up her arms, and I could see she just wanted to be held. And I came in, and we just held on to each other. And for the next few hours, the noise of the ventilator, the doctors and nurses hustling and bustling just faded into the distance. The anxiousness about what's going to happen with the business, things are going, the migration hadn't gone that well. I felt the weight of the world had been on my shoulders, and it was just being lifted. And in that moment, there was nothing else but just Mandy and I holding on to each other. And what we didn't realize was that our Bible study happened to be meeting at that time. And instead of doing a regular Bible study, every single person, one after the other, just stood up and prayed for Mandy. And it was almost like they were holding Mandy up in their prayers, and Jesus was holding on to us. And it was just, I can't describe it, but it was almost just like a sense of peace came over me. And the crazy thing is, 2 days later, they removed the ventilator. And by Saturday, they released us from the hospital and we came home.
That's crazy.
We literally went from, we don't hold much hope, you've been in ICU for 3 weeks, to, yep, you guys are looking good, you can go home.
in less than a week.
Yep.
Yeah. Get your affairs in order. Right. That's not what you want to hear. Yeah. I don't know any other way to explain that other than the power of prayer, the power of God. And obviously what we as humans in medical, we could only do so much.
And sometimes they say medically there's nothing more we can do. And as humans, there's nothing more we can do. And yet somehow God's got a plan. And, that by Monday, so that had happened on Sunday. By Monday, for some reason, I got the migration working, everything flowed through, we got everything working at the office. On Tuesday, I actually closed a deal with a prospect that had wanted to meet. So my brother had traveled from Tennessee. He was with me. I'd been camping out in the ICU, so he bought me a shirt and a tie, and I put it on, blurred the background, and it was the craziest. It was almost surreal. We had the respiratory tech and the nurse working with Mandy, and I'm there with my laptop, going through a proposal with this prospect, went through how we were going to support them, and they signed the deal then and there in the ICU. I just electronically sent it to them. They said, looks good. So it's the first deal I've ever closed in an ICU room. Hopefully I'll never have to do that again. But
yeah,
it was kind of surreal that all of that's going on, and they had no idea. And I'm, it's like you got your boxer shorts on and your shirt and your tie, and everything's normal, everything's good.
Right. Yeah. I don't know why we have to project that everything's so good as humans, right? Like everything's perfect when we all have issues, right? We all have challenges. it can be far less than ICU to really derail you. So, but what a blessing.
And that in September, my wife and I got to celebrate our 33rd anniversary. Went to Cancun, put her toes in the sand, and she was like, wow. We were there in the sun and looking at the blue waters and going, God is great. We couldn't believe in January we were celebrating our 33rd anniversary. We'd just closed our biggest deal in August. So it was our first $1 million contract that we had signed.
Wow.
And just what a change that year. Where sometimes everything's going wrong. And sometimes when you put your faith and trust in God and you get that sense of peace. And again, that saying, do not be anxious about anything. And just deciding what joy are we going to get out of the day today.
That is wonderful wisdom. I want to switch up a little bit and ask you, what's the biggest lesson? Normally, that I frame that in a business context, but all your years, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned?
Your whole life has got to come down to three things: faith, hope, and love. And love has got to be the greatest thing. Because no matter what you're going through, whether you're making money, not making money, going through hard times, going through good times, having faith is critical. Having hope that things are going to get better is always a good thing. But without love, almost nothing else matters. And I think obviously family's got to come at the top, but people that you work with, your clients, your people that you meet in everyday life, people on the side of the streets that are going through hard times. How can you go through life showing love for other people? And I think in business, sometimes you make business decisions that impact people's lives, but how can you do that in a loving, caring, and understanding way?
Yes, that's so well said. If you had one thing to do over or differently, what would that be?
Well, on a personal side, I would say that maybe taking more time to be with your family when the opportunity comes up. And maybe when I was building the business in Zimbabwe, we had our vacations, we took time away, but I think there were some opportunities that I missed. And from a business side, I think joining an accountability group, like a peer group, I wish I'd done that sooner, because I thought that I could do it on my own. But our business really grew when we joined an accountability group, learning from people who have gone before you. And we joined TMT, the Technology Marketing Group, which focuses on marketing, but you're learning from your peers, you're looking at how people are running their businesses, and then you're able to take that and roll it up to your own business so you're not making the same mistakes. And it was actually my wife who pushed me to go into it. And I really thought, no, I built it up in Zimbabwe, I can do it. I just wish I'd done that 5 years beforehand. And I think we would have been that much better, bigger, and stronger today. But, again, you can't go backwards.
Yeah.
But I definitely would say anybody starting the MSP, don't try and do it on your own. Whatever group you become, join an accountability group, peer group, learn from people who have gone before you, and just, don't make the same mistakes. There's no point in reinventing the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Given all that's going on in your world, what's something you're looking forward to, Roland?
Well, we've got another trip planned to Cancun coming up. We've got a conference in Dallas, which is always interesting to go to those conferences and just learn from other people. And then we've got the big Formula One race coming up in October. We love Formula One. I guess it's kind of like I love gardening and my wife loves Formula One. But we've always followed Formula One, and then in 2012 they built the circuit in Austin, so it's a 2-hour drive. So we got PSL seating right on turn 15, top of the S-Bends. So we always love going to that.
Roland, what did you see as your biggest challenge?
So the biggest challenge for every MSP at the moment is going to be growth in 2025. The MSPs post-COVID went through tremendous growth. I think a lot of everybody was growing.
Yeah.
We actually had a great Q3 and Q4 of 24. I know a lot of people did not, but we're starting to see now a slowdown where people are hesitant to make a decision. They're not sure how the tariffs are going to affect them. They're not sure what's going to happen in the economy. So it's almost like people are sitting back, waiting and watching. And I think this is a good opportunity if you do have a little bit of a slowdown to go, okay, how can we improve our operations? How can we improve our customer service? Because at the end of the day, we may be an IT company, but we're a customer service company that happens to be IT related.
Yeah.
And making sure that every person that works for you, so for us, whether it's the person answering the phones, the technician dealing with the ticket, the guy going on site, customer service has got to be the number one priority. How can you make that person feel special?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you really try and get your entire team involved in it, we want to look after, we want to make the customer feel special. And sometimes they're coming in hot. They've had a bad day. Things are going wrong. They're feeling frustrated. How to calm them down and just say, it's okay. We've got you covered. And make them feel special during that time. Build up your reputation and your brand. And sometimes, we've had this rapid growth in our MSP. And sometimes it's good to say, we're not going to stop marketing. We're not going to stop going after new clients, but let's put that focus in on making sure we're running smoothly, that tickets are handled quicker and efficiently. How can we improve our resolution time? How can we improve our response time? How can we improve our customer satisfaction response? How can we make sure that every single customer feels like they're important as they can be? And whether they're smaller or bigger, everybody's got to feel like they're being looked after. And you've got to get your whole team involved. And they've got to feel like they're also going along. This is not just my vision, Mandy and my vision. It's everybody's part of making the company successful. And extreme ownership of whatever they're doing. That's the one book by Jocko. He was a SEAL, and then he was like, whatever you do, every employee's got to have a clear vision of where they're going and take extreme ownership of whatever they're doing. There's no such thing as passing the buck on to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of books, what is the number one book you would recommend?
So, building MSP, obviously you got to read Traction. I think Extreme Ownership by Jocko is good. I wish I could spend more time reading. My life is pretty full. So I tend to sometimes listen to podcasts, listen to inspirational speakers at the conferences, speak to other people. And that's where I'm gaining a lot of my knowledge. And, I don't have the luxury of sitting back and reading a book, because either I'm with Mandy, getting her ready, or helping her out, or we're gardening, or we're running the business. You've got to take some time to make sure that you're taking that devotional time, reading the Bible. And if you can squeeze in a good book, even if it's flipping through to getting to the crux of what you want to learn, then that's important. But to me, I think speaking to people and other business owners has been more beneficial.
That's great advice. What are your views on business as a ministry?
Well, I think you're never going to change somebody's beliefs through force. But all you can do is act by example, and for people to go, I want what he's got. And I think if you can show that in your business and the way that you interact with your staff, with your clients, with your prospects, whether you win a deal or lose a deal, you've got to show that you lead by faith. And then people are going to start saying, I want what they've got in their lives. And I think that's more important to me than maybe preaching or pushing your beliefs onto somebody else. I don't think pushing your beliefs onto somebody else has ever worked.
Yeah.
But for people to go, oh, tell me a little bit, how did you get through that? What was your inspiration? And when they open up, that's when you can start guiding them through, because everybody's going through difficulties. Life is not flat and level, it's ups and downs.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people are in the valley, if you can say, I've been there too, but there's faith and hope.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it reminds me that we're speaking because a fellow MSP, a fellow Titan, a fellow business owner got to know your story. And they said, Damien, you've really got to talk to Roland. This is an amazing story. And I truly believe that. So I'm thankful that Elmo introduced us. For everybody that is watching or listening, if they'd love to connect with you or reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
If you go to impresscomputers.com, I'll have my information there, or just Roland at impresscomputers.com. Maybe we can connect. Maybe I can share some things with you that would help you, and maybe there's things that you could help me with. I love connecting with people.
Yeah, make sure to take Roland up on that offer if you're watching or listening. Roland, this has truly been a blessing to me. Thank you so much for sharing so authentically. There's so many lessons here that I took away. And thank you for being on MSP Mindset today.
Thanks, Damien. You have a wonderful day.